Hello, sweetheart. To hear more startling stories every day, like and subscribe. Greetings from Lies and Secrets. Here I was, enjoying a nice cup of tea on our peaceful porch, as the sun began to drop, creating shadows that seemed to reach deep into my mind. Once a little bundle of happiness, Rex had developed into something neither Darien nor I had expected. Alone in my comfortable house dress that night, I had to deal with a situation involving Rex that would rock our entire world. I stood there, my pulse pounding, wondering how I could possibly tell Darien that our idyllic world had just been upended as he entered the room with his typical upbeat, "Honey, I'm home" greeting. As I sat on the porch, drinking a cup of tea that had long since gone cold, the sun was sinking and long shadows stretched across our suburban house. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind of stillness that makes your own thoughts sound louder. I recall how Rex's little paws hardly made a sound on the wooden floors the day we brought him home. He was a small ball of fur that made us giggle and make us feel lighter. He was a bundle of happiness. After 3 years, Rex was no longer the little easy-to-handle pet we had hoped for. He had developed into a whole different person, too big and strong for his breed. Darien, my husband, and I had always loved animals, but neither of us could have foreseen Rex's metamorphosis. On a normal Tuesday night, the occurrence took place. Because of an urgent project, Darien was working late at the workplace. I was by myself, wearing a loose-fitting dress that I usually wore when I didn't have guests over. Rex was pacing the living room with remarkable restlessness, his tail swishing so violently that it toppled a vase. I attempted to soothe him, but he leaped as I got close, his paws striking my shoulders with such power that I fell backward. I stumbled to the floor in the chaos, trying to regain my balance, and the world whirled around me. Rex became overly excited and acted unpredictably, which caught me completely off guard. He lunged unexpectedly, knocking me over and leaving me shaken. The ensuing hush was deafening. My thoughts were racing as I tried to comprehend what had just happened. Rex, who was now breathing heavily next to me, didn't seem to realize how serious what he was doing was. My heart was racing as I lay there, overwhelmed by surprise and anxiety, unsure how to respond. How did this occur? Was it my responsibility for not exercising better control over him? My body shook as I slowly forced myself to stand up, the questions circling in my mind. How does one even start to explain something so unimaginable? I knew I had to tell Darien. I was standing there fiddling with my dress when the front door snapped open. "Honey, I'm home!" Darien's voice cried. My heart sank even more when his upbeat tone cut through the thick air. I inhaled deeply while examining myself. My secret hovered between us, unsaid, but tangible as I turned to face him. The time had come for me to tell the truth. What would come next? What would Darien think more significantly? How would this alter all we understood about our shared life? The world stopped for a second as Darien's gaze locked with me. His smile, which had always been so inviting and warm, suddenly seemed to reach deep into my soul. I moved forward to welcome him, my lips quivering slightly as I attempted a smile. With a somewhat elevated and strained voice, I managed to say, "Hey, you're home early," Darien said, staring at me. "Yeah, the project ended sooner than anticipated. You are agitated. Is everything all right?" I nodded too hastily as my cheeks began to flush. A little run-in with Rex just happened. He's becoming too large for his own good. Darien laughed and reached down to shake Rex's fur, who excitedly wagged his tail without any malice. "You should be careful with this large person, don't you?" My heart ached because of his flippant attitude and his lack of awareness of the tempest that was building within of me. I wanted to yell and tell him everything, but I was unable to do so. I replied, "Yeah, I'll be more careful instead." It was a quiet dinner. Darien discussed his day project deadlines and the routine aspects of office politics. I listened, nodding when appropriate, but my thoughts were elsewhere, repeatedly reliving the incident. Every clink of silverware seemed like a charge, and every conversational break was a chance for admission. I stood by the sink with my hands dipped in soapy water after supper, feeling the weight of my stillness As Darien cleared the table, shadows danced across the walls as the kitchen light wavered a little, reflecting my inner anguish. I began almost raising my voice above a whisper. "Darien, I have something to share with you." His expression changed from casual to worried as he turned. "What's the matter?" With the words weighing heavily on my tongue, I inhaled deeply. "It concerns me and Rex. He did something today that caught me off guard." Darien's forehead wrinkled. "What are you saying?" The confession teetered on the verge of my lips as I paused. "He simply got too close when I fell because he was so enthusiastic. Although it was an accident." Darien's eyes searched mine for the reality he feared, and his face became pale. "Too near." "What do you say?" The air felt heavier, the room smaller. I could see the parts of our ideal existence rearranging into something completely different as the wheels turned in his head. "I'm stating," I hesitated, picking my words carefully, "that Rex got a little too rough in his excitement, and it startled me. I don't know how to respond to it." Darien's eyes flicked to the floor and back to me as his jaw tightened. "Are you all right? Did he cause you any harm?" I was fine physically, but I was a complete mess emotionally. "I'm fine, but I believe we should take action regarding Rex. Perhaps he needs additional instruction or... I'm not sure." The proposal hovered between us like a precarious bridge across a gap of uncertainty and perplexity. Slowly, Darien nodded his thoughts, obviously racing. "We will work things out. Perhaps we ought to take him to a specialist to check for any missing issues." There was a promise of action at the end of the session, but there were still many unanswered questions. I could sense the gap widening between Darien and me as we got ready for bed, as well as between us and Rex. Once so strong, the trust was now brittle. The silence was deafening as I lay in bed and gazed at the ceiling. Even though Darien was breathing, I could tell he was not thinking about sleeping. We were both standing at the threshold, not knowing what was beyond after the event. With Rex had opened a door to a portion of our lives we had never expected. As the night became darker, so did my determination to face this head-on. We would get treatment tomorrow, but tonight I was up worrying about our marriage, our family, and the dog we used to love so much because of my secret and the fear of what it would mean for us. Our bedroom was softly lit by the morning light that came in through the curtains. The revelations from the night before were still pressing down on my chest, and I hadn't slept. As a silent reminder of the distance that had developed between us overnight, Darien was already awake, and his side of the bed was frigid. He was pouring coffee into a mug in the kitchen when I found him, his back to me. There was a noticeable tension in place of the customary warmth of our daily routine. I tried to find the perfect words and cleared my throat. "We have to discuss Rex, Darien." My voice was more steady than I felt as I spoke. His face was unreadable as he turned. "It's been on my mind all night. Early this morning I made a call to the veterinarian. He is available to them this afternoon." The relief was instantaneous, but short-lived. "That's good, all right. But we have much to talk about, Darien." With a clink that reverberated around the silent room, he put down his mug and nodded. "I am aware. Come on, let's sit." Unaware of the chaos he had caused in our life, Rex watched us from his bed as we made our way into the living room, his tail thumping lightly on the floor. "Darien, I'm concerned." With my hands firmly gripped in my lap, I started. "It's about us, not just Rex. Things have changed as a result of what transpired." A storm was building in Darien's eyes as they met mine. I'm puzzled, irritated, and unsure of how to feel. However, I'm here, and together we'll overcome this. Despite his best efforts to console, his comments simply served to widen the gap. "Even though I didn't mean to betray you, I feel like I have. Darien, I'm afraid. I'm worried about how this will affect our marriage." In a gesture that was both reassuring and aloof, he reached out and covered my hand. "We must comprehend what transpired. There might be a problem with Rex, or it might be a one-time occurrence. However, this cannot define who we are." The phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Our appointment was confirmed by the veterinarian. In the context of our deteriorating domestic harmony, the routine chore of making plans to take Rex to the veterinarian felt unreal. The silence in the car was oppressive as we made our way to the veterinarian. I looked at Darien, who had his jaw clenched and his eyes fixed on the road. Rex in the rear seemed to detect the tension as he looked between us with what I could only assume was bewilderment, while resting his head on the seat. When we arrived at the veterinarian's office, Dr. Larson greeted us warmly as usual, but his grin wavered when he noticed our serious looks. What seems to be wrong with Rex right now? His businesslike manner changed to one of worry as he questioned. With a quiet voice, Darien took the lead. Rex has been acting strangely lately. We're concerned that he could endanger himself or other people. As I described the situation to Dr. Larson, my voice trailed off at the most delicate portions, but he listened carefully. He took notes while nodding. I get it. To determine whether a medical problem is at play, let's begin with a comprehensive checkup. Rex, ever the nice boy, passed every test in the extensive examination. As he worked, Larson said, "Physical health and behavioral changes can occasionally be connected. We'll look for indications of stress hormone abnormalities or neurological problems." It was excruciating to wait for the findings. Darien and I sat in the waiting room, our silences full with questions and unsaid anxieties the magazines unopened. Dr. Larson's face was serious as he came back. Although Rex appears to be in good physical health, there are indications of stress and even some underlying worry. His actions could be an indication of his unease or perplexity. I can put you in touch with an expert and suggest behavioral therapy. The knowledge that our troubles were far from overpowered, the relief that it wasn't a serious medical condition. Darien's hand met mine and gave me a light squeeze as we exited the veterinarian's office. He whispered, "We'll get through this." But his eyes betrayed his words. It was a tense environment back home. Sensing the change, Rex was more reserved, his customary enthusiasm replaced by a wary manner. Though my heart wasn't in it, I agreed with Darien when he proposed that we begin looking for a trainer right away. We had a strained conversation when we sat down to dinner that night. By talking about his job, the neighbors, and anything else but the elephant in the room, Darien attempted to get it back to normal. However, the tension was evident with each mouthful serving as a reminder of our unresolved disagreements. Darien declared he was going for a solitary walk after supper. I watched him go, the door clicking softly shut, as if a wall were being put up between us. I sat on the floor with Rex by myself, his head in my lap, my fingers stroking his fur. With tears in my eyes, I muttered, "I'm sorry, boy. I'm so sorry." The night dragged on, and Darien's face was a mask of resolve when he came back. He sat next to me and said, "I've been thinking in a forceful voice. We must confront this directly. We'll begin working with the trainer tomorrow, and we might want to see a counselor as well." The suggestion hung in the air for us like a lifeline tossed into choppy waters. I nodded, because I was more afraid of losing what we had created together than I was of facing our problems. The gap between us seemed to be both physical and emotional. As we got ready for bed, I listened to Darien's breathing while I lay awake wondering if we would ever be able to reconnect. In addition to undermining our trust, the Rex event revealed how brittle our relationship was. I experienced a mixture of anxiety and hope the following day as we got ready to see the trainer. Is it possible for us to save our relationship? Could you help Rex? Our formerly straightforward, contented life was clouded by the questions that hung over us, and a new darker thought began to creep in as we drove to the trainer. But what if this was only the start? What would happen if our lives were filled with more secrets and betrayals? As we pulled into the parking lot, I understood that the true test of our marriage was just getting started. The road ahead was uncertain. The only sound between us during the long journey to the trainers was the hum of the automobile motor, and we were all deep in meditation. Rex sat in the back, silently pleading with me for understanding, as his eyes sometimes locked with mine in the rearview mirror. When we arrived, we were met by Miss Thompson, a stern-looking woman with a kind yet professional manner. She ushered us into a large room filled with a variety of training aids. "Let's begin by comprehending what has been going on." Miss Thompson stated in a composed and commanding tone. The words felt like sandpaper on my throat. As I repeated the incident, my voice barely audible above a whisper. Darien's eyes were far away, absorbed in his own tempest, but his hand found mine and squeezed me in wordless support. Miss Thompson's countenance was unreadable as she listened carefully. Rex seems to be experiencing some worry or perplexity. Dogs can occasionally misread human signals or behavior, especially those with strong instincts. We'll need to practice setting clear limits and communicating clearly. Basic commands were given to start the session, but Rex didn't seem right and wasn't responding as quickly as usual. He was cautious instead of enthusiastic as usual, as though he could feel the tension between me and Darien. Ms. Thompson talked to us about the value of consistency and the necessity of reiterating our responsibilities as pack leaders while she worked with Rex. She clarified that dogs require structure. They flourish when they are aware of their position within the family structure. They risk becoming confused or overbearing without it. Her comments, which were a metaphor for our own relationship, kept repeating in my head. Had we lost our responsibilities in this marriage, our structure? As I watched Darien attempt to follow Ms. Thompson's directions with a mask of concentration on his face, the thought tormented me. Darien's words disturbed the quiet as we made our way back to the car after the session. He replied in a serious tone, "We need to talk more about us, not just Rex." Feeling the weight of the unsaid, I nodded. "I'm afraid of what this implies for us, Darien, and I know it." He came to a halt, looking directly into my eyes. "I agree, but we must not allow this to shatter us. We must defend what we have." The air felt a little less oppressive, but the drive home was quieter. When we got home, Darien recommended that we have a conversation concerning us as well as Rex. Rex lay at our feet, his head resting on his paws, observing us with what appeared to be concern as we took our seats in the living room. "I feel like I've let you down, Darien." I blurted out the confession. In our marriage, not just with Rex, I've been absorbed in my own world and aloof. Darien's fingers extended to wipe a tear off my cheek as his face softened. I also sensed it. I've been so preoccupied with my work that I've forgotten what really matters. But you're not to blame for what happened with Rex. Fixing this is our joint responsibility. Layers of neglect and miscommunication that had accumulated over time were exposed by the open, honest, and flowing discourse. We spoke our worries, our annoyances, and our love, which remained despite everything hidden beneath a mountain of unsaid complaints. "Let's make a deal," Darien proposed as the night became darker. "No more keeping things hidden or secrets. From now on, we tackle everything together." With a flicker of optimism, I nodded. "Perhaps we ought to see that counselor for ourselves as well as for Rex." Darien nodded, his determination unwavering. "For us, yes." After a sleepless night, Darien was already up preparing breakfast when I woke up the following morning. As though some of the haze between us had been lifted by our chat, the mood had changed and become lighter. With a cautious but sincere smile, Darien handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Today, we start anew." We spent the day on the phone scheduling appointments with a marriage counselor for us and a canine behaviorist for Rex. Every stride seemed like a tiny triumph, a move in the right direction. However, a fresh tension emerged as the day went on. I discovered an old letter from before the incident, while sorting through some things. I had forgotten about it. It came from Darien's former partner, whom he had vowed to keep out of his life. The letter was dated only a month ago and was too loving. My heart fell. Here we were attempting to reconstruct. Nevertheless, everything was in danger of falling apart because of this fragment of the past. As I heard Darien's footsteps coming closer, I gripped the letter with shaking hands. I called out, trembling, "Darien, we have other things to discuss." His face was a mixture of worry and bewilderment as he walked in. "What's the matter?" I gave him the letter and observed his face as he read it, going from bewilderment to insight, and then to a look of remorse. He began, This isn't what it looks like." But the words seemed vacuous. The fragile trust we were rebuilding suddenly felt at risk again as the room seemed to close in around us. Then Darien, what is it? With the weight of possible betrayal crushing me, I asked in a voice that was hardly audible. Darien's face was twisted with a mixture of emotions, including dread, guilt, and something I couldn't quite put my finger on, and the ensuing stillness was deafening. Without looking into my eyes, he inhaled deeply before starting to talk. I wrote this letter to her in an attempt to wrap things up. After I informed her that we would no longer be able to see one another, she wrote this. I swear I didn't answer. I forgot about it just as I was about to discard it. The tiny glimmer of optimism that had started to burn between us was extinguished by his words, which were like a chilly blast of water. Ignored it. I repeated my voice, rising in astonishment and rage. How could you have forgotten something like this? Darien? Do you really believe that this is something you can forget after everything we've gone through and what just transpired with Rex? Darien's shoulders drooped, and a visible vulnerability took the place of his customary assurance. I am aware that I made a mistake. I ought to have informed you. I was afraid of how you would respond, and that I would lose you for something that had already ended. With each heartbeat, the walls of the room closed in, making it feel oppressive. Were you afraid, Darien? What about me? I was scared because I thought our life together was coming to an end, and now this is happening. I retreated as he reached for me, leaving a gap of uncertainty between us. Despite my heart's quiver, I spoke firmly. I need time. To comprehend all of this, I must ponder. With unshed tears sparkling in his eyes, Darien nodded. I get it. Let me give you some room. Please know that I'm available and prepared to go to whatever lengths to resolve this. I couldn't look at him, so I turned away. My mind was spinning with ideas of betrayal, and how our life together was now in danger of collapsing. I was left alone with Rex, who stared me with his large, bewildered eyes, while the sound of his retreating footsteps reverberated in the quiet. The days that followed were a haze. I went about my everyday activities, but my mind was focused on the letter, the Rex event, and Darien's secret. The chasm of our possible separation loomed beneath me, and every moment felt like a tightrope walk. In an attempt to regain some sense of normalcy, I spent time with Rex. Although the training had somewhat altered his behavior, the memory of that day still hung over us. I sat with Rex, his head resting in my lap one evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, bathing our garden in an orange glow. The calm was a lie, a far cry from the raging fury within. I requested separation from Darien, who was staying at a hotel, but the distance didn't help me think clearly or lessen the suffering. I needed answers from myself as much as from Darien. Could we have endured these betrayals because of our love? Is it possible for us to regain trust? My daydreaming was interrupted when the phone rang. Darien was the one. Can we talk? He said in a hesitant tone. With a mixture of dread and urgency, I nodded. He showed up soon after appearing to have had a restless night. Unspoken comments weighed heavily on the gap between us as we sat in the living room. Darien began, his voice softly. I've been thinking a lot about us, about what I did, about what happened with Rex. I visited a therapist in an attempt to comprehend my own behaviors and anxieties. I listened with a mixture of skepticism and optimism in my heart. Additionally, I've come to appreciate how much I've taken for granted. I was self-centered not only with the letter, but also with my time and focus. I want to make amends for everything, not just the letter. To work on us, I would like to attend counseling with you. He was obviously sincere, but the wounds were new. I want to believe you, Darien, but you can't simply regain someone's trust overnight. It's about everything that has been accumulating, not just the letter. He nodded while looking directly into my eyes. I realize that I'm not immediately pleading for forgiveness. I'm requesting an opportunity to demonstrate my and our capacity for change. The only sound in the room was Rex's gentle breathing, as if he realized how serious the situation was. When I looked closely at Darien, I saw not only the person who had wronged me, but also the person I had loved, and who was now giving his heart broken and all. All right, I muttered the word, seeming both light and heavy. Let's try, but first we have counseling, and from now on, we're absolutely honest. Darien's body relaxed a little, showing his relief. His voice was full with emotion as he said, "Thank you. I promise not to disappoint you again." The promise of therapy and the dedication to honesty lingered in the air as he departed that night, a shaky optimism. I felt the burden of our shared history and the uncertainty of our future as I watched him leave. We went to our first counseling session the following day. It was raw and uncomfortable, but it was essential. We talked about our hopes for the future, our missteps and our concerns. Dr. Ellis, the counselor, listened carefully as her gaze shifted between us, taking in the depths of our suffering and uncertainty. "Thank you both for being here," said Dr. Ellis. "Although facing these problems is difficult, it is an essential part of the healing process." She stopped, allowing us to take in the seriousness of our predicament. "First, let's talk about what led you here today." Darien inhaled deeply, while speaking in a steady but strained tone. "We've experienced a lot. We were both horrified by an incident involving our dog Rex. To make matters even more complicated, a letter from my past has surfaced. It feels like everything is unraveling," I added, nodding. "We're attempting to figure out how we got here, how to proceed, and whether we can still trust one another." Dr. Ellis leaned forward with a sympathetic look. "Indeed, the cornerstone of each partnership is trust. Let's discuss each of your personal definitions of trust and how these incidents have affected it." It was painfully honest as the session progressed. Darien talked about how he felt bad about the letter, as well as the emotional gap he had allowed to develop between us. "I've been so preoccupied with advancing my profession and proving myself that I've forgotten what really matters. I failed to see how much I was ignoring us. I expressed my sense of betrayal and my concern that our relationship was precariously based. Even though you were standing next to me, Darien, I still felt alone. I feel as though my perspective of our lives has been distorted by Rex and the letter." Dr. Ellis led us through activities aimed at re-establishing open communication and allowing us to freely communicate our needs and anxieties. She clarified that communication is more than just talking. It all comes down to paying attention to what the other person is saying and not saying. She assigned us homework as the session came to an end. "Write down 3 qualities you both like about each other and 3 things you wish you could change. Next time, we'll talk about these." As we left the counselor's office, there was a new tension in the air between us, one of potential rather than strife. As the weight of our confessions settled about us like a thick fog, we drove home in silence, each of us deep in meditation. Unaware of the storm he had been in, the center of Rex welcomed us home with his typical zeal and wagging tail. I was confused and affectionate at the same time as I observed him. More to myself than to Darien, I murmured, "We need to keep working with him too." Darien nodded in a quiet voice. "For all of us, yes, we do." Although there was a noticeable gap between us as we lay in bed that night, there was also a tenuous but present thread of connectedness. "Do you think we can get through this, Darien?" I whispered into the darkness. His eyes searched mine in the gloom as he turned to face me. "I'd like to think we can. I'm prepared to go to any lengths. Are you?" I agreed, hoping to rebuild while battling the fear of losing him. "It will be difficult, but I am." "It will be," he said, placing his hand beneath the blankets. "However it might strengthen us." Rex and I had a variety of therapy sessions in the days that followed. Rex behaved better, and he made progress throughout his training sessions with Ms. Thompson. He appeared to be getting less anxious with each session as he learned to obey orders more consistently. Our marital therapy sessions were increasingly tumultuous. Our relationship's layers were revealed by each session, revealing weaknesses and unresolved issues from the past. We learned to listen without formulating a counterargument, to argue in a constructive manner, and to comprehend rather than to win. After a particularly difficult session, Darien and I sat in the living room one evening, our shared insights echoing in the emptiness between us. With hesitation, Darien began, "I've been thinking. Perhaps we should get away from everything for a weekend and go on a trip together, just the 2 of us." The thought was both enticing and disturbing. I acknowledge that sometimes it's nice to take a break, and I get a little excited at the prospect of leaving our present situation. We decided to take a vacation to a remote cabin in the mountains so that we could spend time together and alone with our thoughts. It was a quiet drive, but not an uncomfortable one. With its tall trees and the clear mountain air, the landscape appeared to relieve some of our mental stress. At the cabin, amid the peace and quiet of nature, we started talking, really talking. We talked about our past, our hopes for the future, and the anxieties that had prevented us from speaking for so long. Darien took hold of my hand one night under a starry sky. "What you said about feeling alone has been on my mind. I apologize for allowing that to occur. In every manner, I want to be there for you." I felt the sincerity in his touch as I grasped his hand. Additionally, I need to be more forthcoming and share my troubles rather than bearing them alone. The weekend marked a sea change. We made love with a tenderness that was like rediscovering each other, and we laughed and we sobbed. It was more than simply a physical reunion. It was a reaffirmation of our commitment to one another and an emotional reunion. The world appeared different when I got home. Rex welcomed us with his typical zeal, but it now seemed to represent optimism and the continuation of life. We resumed our marital and personal treatment sessions with newfound vigor. After several months, our relationship's rifts gradually started to heal. Rebuilding trust was happening gradually rather than all at once. Rex was also doing well, acting more like the person we had always wanted him to be. Darien turned to face me one evening when we were sitting on the porch, taking in the sunset. "Remember when we brought Rex home for the first time, how easy it all appeared? The memories warmed me, and I grinned. Yes, and now, have a look at us. Despite having survived the fire, we remain here." He nodded his eyes deep in comprehension as they met mine. "We have evolved. I believe it has made us stronger." I experienced a deep sense of calm as the sun set and covered our house in a golden glow. We reached this point of clarity and hope after a difficult trip that was full of suffering and epiphanies. What about Rex? I looked at our now well-behaved dog, who was lying at our feet with his tail thumping quietly, and inquired. Darien laughed. "He is now a part of our story and serves as a reminder that we are capable of overcoming even the most difficult obstacles." With the promise of a future based on the lessons learned from the past, we sat in a silence that felt comfortable now. As the stars started to shine, I understood that although our tale had its share of dark periods, it was also lighted by instances of resiliency and deep love. This chapter's conclusion marked a beginning as well as an end. A time when trust was a genuine breathing aspect of our everyday existence rather than merely a term. And when we got up to head inside, I was confident that we would face whatever was ahead together lovingly and honestly, and with the knowledge that sometimes the biggest shifts come from the most unlikely places. If you liked the article, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. This will enable us to produce stories for you that are more captivating.